Hi. Okay, so this is my second check-in for our final group maker project, and I'll be completely honest, this past Thursday was a rather frustrating day. I think our group came to a somewhat abrupt and unpleasant realization that maybe we weren't as far along in the ideation stage of our project as we wanted to be, and because of that we didn't have a very good stock from which to build some prototypes on Thursday. But I can fully attest to the fact that it's so incredibly easy to get caught up in the thinking part of the design process instead of simply doing. We racked our brains and racked them again on Thursday, just constantly trying to come up with something to prototype. So just as a refresher, our content area is science, and we were thinking that our challenge is essentially going to be to come up with a way to help students better conceptually connect and or visualize how a seemingly ridiculous and intimidating math equation can actually illustrate something that's going on right in front of them, such as a chemical reaction. So we think that a concept we could focus on is that of reaction mechanisms, and we want to show them how various factors such as temperature, collision and orientation of reactants, and activation energy could all come into play very easily. So for the sake of building a rudimentary prototype for a class activity, we tried to come up with something that slightly resembled a reaction profile, simply in the sense that a small car, which was solely meant to symbolize the species of a chemical reaction, would be able to travel along its little track until completion. So let me show you here picture of some of our prototypes that we made. So as you can see, one of our attempts with this prototype was to provide for our testers some visual aid that would hopefully help in their connection with a common chemistry equation known as the Arrhenius equation, which I can show you in a minute. But essentially the Arrhenius equation relates temperature, which we signified by the flames here. It relates temperature and activation energy to the rate at which that reaction happens. So in this particular experiment, for example, each car, like I said, represents the same reaction given that the activation energies are the same, but the thing that was varied was the temperature. So for example, this one has a bigger flame, it's at the higher temperature. Smaller flame represents the lower temperature. The glitch we ran into quite quickly, though, was that it was not exactly ideal and a little too subjective to try to tell the students how they were exactly supposed to simulate different temperature, because it would almost require them to already understand the fundamentals of how the equation works, and that's not exactly our goal. So the other thing, well, I can show you a few more pictures here of how we changed the prototypes just slightly. So here's an example of how changing the activation energy might affect it. And this is kind of just a different view of that same thing. So our prototypes were kind of sad, but we still have kind of a good goal going on here, I think. So let me get back to here. So the other thing I think we got really hung up on was that we were running out of ways to see how anything we could make, like physically make, would even closely rival that, or the insight that's already available to a student in, say, a textbook. So with this realization and with the feedback of some of our prototype testers, we came to a pretty loose decision, I guess, that perhaps a storyboard of an app or a simulation might be the most effective way to tackle this challenge. So with an interactive app, for example, a student could use a series of sliders to manually change the things that affect how a reaction mechanism actually happens. Something that I thought of that could potentially bring in maybe 3D printing or laser cutting would be to teach the concept that two or more reactant molecules must collide with each other, not only with a certain amount of kinetic energy, which relates to the temperature, but also in the correct orientation. So maybe you could use different colored filaments to create some distinct molecules, and of course the goal would be to get students to understand that in order for a reaction to occur, those reactant molecules must collide in the correct orientation. However, because of the affordable availability of things like molecular model kits already. Something like that might not necessarily require 3D printing, just could be an option. But I think the same goal could be, or the same concept, I guess, could be reached in an app with the right amount of thought into it. So lastly, another important skill I think science students should have is that of graphical interpretation. So that Arrhenius equation deals with reaction rates, is a very simple linear relationship, actually. So once you understand where to plug things in, and I can show you it here. So I'm just writing it out quickly for you to see kind of what I'm talking about when I say the Arrhenius equation. So this is a linear relationship. You can see that. So as you can see, the ln, or natural log of k, simply means, hope you can see it, the ln of k is related to the rate at which the reaction occurs. That E sub a refers to activation energy, T refers to the temperature, and the ln of a over here refers to the collision frequency factor. So that's a lot of important, or complicated stuff right now, but our goal with this type of project is to make this seem like a less daunting equation. Maybe we can use kind of some simulation or apps to, along with reaction profiles, to allow a student to kind of explore manipulations of this equation on their own and see how it really affects things in real life. So, and also understanding the graphical interpretation or plot of that equation too, I think could really help. So it's a lot, I know, and that's where we're at right now, and we have a lot more work to do, but we're very excited to see what we come up with. So we'll catch up next week. Please get out of here. Okay, bye.